Hey everybody, welcome to Monday. It's Monday. Boss fight tomorrow. Episode 2 boss fight tomorrow. This space tomorrow, 11 a.m. It will be a premiere format, so I will be in chatting with y'all. I'm so glad to get this episode done and out the door. It's been a slog, but more on that. There will be stories and factoids and things like that at the premiere but I talk about most of that in the Patreon Zoom party we do after each boss fight episode. So if you want to participate in that, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Plus it helps me out. Yeah. Before we get into the topic, another toy. Because this topic, talking about microaggressions in any way, can be triggering for some people. So first I want you to meet Poochie. Poochie was my first best friend. Poochie has been with me my entire life. He is literally with me in like my earliest baby pictures. And you can tell Poochie has all like the markers of being a very well-loved first best friend. Poochie's a beanbag toy, so he's needed his butt sewed up quite a bit. He's getting like worn out. But Poochie is good first best friend. Right, Poochie? Right, Poochie. Mwah. Okay, so let's get into the topic. This is something I've been struggling with for a while. The whole way that microaggression theory, which is primarily something that is at all useful in professional environments, but it is sort of broken containment in that regard to everywhere, including discussions about video games and the people who play them. The way I am going to use microaggression, because the problem with microaggression is on one extreme of the definitional spectrum of this term. First problem we get into is that what is a microaggression? It's a difficult thing to define. But on one end of the definitional spectrum is clear, but we don't really need it. I mean, the most functional, useful description of a microaggression is they're insults rooted in stereotype. Well, why do we need the term microaggression when we can use the term insult or offensive comment, right? Most people understand you do not be insulting at work. That's usually a bad idea. Unfortunately, we live in a corporate environment right now where bosses insult their staff all the time and get away with it, so it creates toxic workplace cultures. But on the other end of the definitional spectrum, microaggressions become so amorphous a concept that they could be anything. Quoting Wikipedia, microaggression is a term used for brief and commonplace daily verbal or behavioral indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative attitudes towards stigmatized or culturally marginalized groups. And what that basically means is anything that offends somebody from a marginalized group. That's what it means. Lots and lots and lots of words. Grammarly would go crazy on Wikipedia. The way to describe it from a place of empathy, which is important, because of course I'm going to go into this and then say everything that's wrong with this theory when it comes to gaming, right? We can all understand the idea of a comment that hurts us or annoys us even. It happens once. I watched a TED Talk that said it's like an emotional paper cut, right? And one paper cut, or in my case, cat scratches, because Scout is Mr. Chomp. No big deal, right? I got a couple of little scratches right here and right here, right? No big deal. Barely even noticed them, right? But imagine if my whole arm had like little bitty scratches. My whole arm would be like, ow. And that's the long-term impact of people having to navigate spaces where they're constantly being reminded it's not for them, right? The one that freaks me out And this is it's funny because I have people come up to me and touch my hair without asking because of the color of my hair. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So when I hear people with basically natural black hair, people come up and touch their hair without asking, it's somebody invading your personal space, right? It's a sort of, whoa, that was unexpected. And I get that some people are just naturally touchy-feely. Like, I grew up with the neighborhood had a lot of like older Italian ladies, and they were touchy-feely with everybody. They were like, oh, and everything. And so they'd grab your hair and oh, so pretty. And you kind of got used to it after a while, but you were like, bleh. But, and this is the problem. You get into this contextual thing. More on this later. But, people sort of understand. Yeah, that makes sense. People don't like being touched without their permission by strangers, right? If somebody's a friend and they touch on the shoulder or something like that, or they do something like that, they're friends. And this is the important thing to recognize is when someone is your friend, this in theory should not be an issue because the person has the ability to go, cut that out, I don't like it. Right? Now, at work, this is more difficult because at work, there is a natural power imbalance between employer and employees. And employees do need a system where they can say when an employer, like their supervisors, are doing things that are making it more difficult. They've got constant static in their head because certain behaviors are making them miserable one teeny little cut at a time, right? That all makes sense, right? But then in a functional workplace, an employee would be able to say, look, can you please not say that? That's a sensitive subject. And in a proper employee space, that's cool. That, like a properly managed office, that's cool. That seems to be something people don't do anymore because we live in a culture of fear. And so because people are so afraid of getting fired that they won't say to somebody like, look, can you please not do that? I don't like it. It's a thing, right? People don't feel like they can say that anymore. I get into trouble because I do. And that's because I don't play the nonverbal cues game. I work with and have friends, too many who are on the autism spectrum. I can't expect them to pick up on my nonverbal cues. I have to tell them, I do not like this. Like even on Twitch, right? I say, I don't like the word bitch. It's lazy. If people use the word bitch in chat, I don't freak out. But what's kind of cool is another chatter will say to them, just so you know, Leanna doesn't like the word. And then they're like, well, why? And I don't say it's sexist, right? I say because I think it's a lazy word. It replaces the issue you actually have with a person, male or female. Oh, that guy's a bitch. What are you trying to say? Oh, that woman's a bitch. What are you trying to say? Take the word out and you become a more effective communicator, right? That works. It works really well on the Twitch channel. The ones that I find interesting, and this is what made me realize microaggression theory has a serious problem with it because it reinforces the very power structures it claims to be trying to oppose, trying to make people more comfortable. It's not actually doing that because there become acceptable words for things that people who belong to that marginalized group who don't like those terms of phrase, they are now lacking power to say, I don't like that because this has become the corporately accepted style guide, right? The two examples I bring up all the time are people of color. And I actually use that in the episode of Boss Fight tomorrow because it actually does mean people who aren't white. It's not black people or brown. It's not a single group. I'm not calling somebody a person of color, right? It's just people, everybody who isn't white, because it's about the gamer identity, you know, the myth that the gamer identity is white, straight, cisgendered male, right? But usually that's not how it's used. You know, you're a person of color. You know, no, he's not. He's black, or he's brown, or he's Asian, you know? And you know, in Canada, we actually use the words where people are from, right? You know, they're Pakistani, they're Indian, they're Persian, they're, you know, at least in Toronto, that's what we do. You know, they're Inuit, they're First Nation. We're getting to the point where we're actually like referring to the specific tribe someone is from, which I think is good because there are some friends of mine who prefer the term people of color. There are some who utterly can't stand it. And for the people I know well enough to remember that, I'm going to use their preferred term. Now, the trade-off is they don't freak out if someone forgets. It's an irritant, right? But I try to minimize the irritant. Now, is there any intended? Is there any offense intended by the term people of color? No, but I totally understand my friends who say, I'm not a crayon. Fair. I get that. Not that there wouldn't, and of course that immediately makes me think of that time in like the late 80s, early 90s where dressing up like a crayon for Halloween was considered cool. And that's what I imagine. Yes, correct. You don't look like those people who dress up like that on Halloween. Therefore, I understand your exemption. But the one that is increasingly frustrating to me is the term Latinx. Because a lot of Spanish people can't say the word. It's not a word that's in Spanish construction. And to me, what I've heard from, I don't know, I don't have a single personal Hispanic friend who can stand the term Latinx. Not one. Even the people on the LGBTQ spectrum that I know who are Hispanic, they cannot stand Latinx because they actually speak Spanish and they say that word would never appear. So what the popularization of the term Latinx is doing is reminding Hispanic people that people who don't speak their language get to decide what they are called. And it is a reminder of that every single time the word comes up because it would never exist in Spanish. The X goes on the beginning of the word. I don't know, we just can't do Latin or standardize to Hispanic because quite frankly, that's more accurate in terms of how we refer to, it's a weird one because how do you refer to somebody who's say from, you know, their parents are from like Venezuela or something like that, but they don't speak Spanish. They're not technically Hispanic. I guess you can say they're Venezuelan Canadian or Venezuelan American or something like that. Or a lot of them just want to be, I'm Canadian. Simple, good, yay. Call people what they want to be called. And it's so weird that we live in an age right now where people can make up their own pronouns. And it's just call people what they want to be called. Okay, that actually makes sense. But now we have to learn terms like freaking Latinx that are very polarizing terms. But oh no, that's the right thing to say here. What happened to call people what they want to be called? Because quite frankly, I think call people what they want to be called is the thing that makes more sense. If this person is fine with African American, if that's who they identify, awesome. Very few people identify as African Canadian because they say, I'm from the Caribbean, I ain't from Africa, right? Afro-Caribbean is what some people prefer. Some people are like, I'm Jamaican. All right, you know, cool. That's what they want to be called. Cool. Easy. You learn name, you learn this. Simple, right? Because there's very few times where this is relevant at all. A lot of the times, quite frankly, when this stuff comes up, It's because somebody is remarking on something they shouldn't be remarking on, or someone is zeroing in on something they shouldn't be zeroing in on. Because a person's identifiable characteristics, their immutable characteristics should not be relevant to whether their idea is good or not at work or in like a volunteer group. Just saying, it only gets awkward when it's like you're trying to describe them to someone. And it's like, sometimes you don't want to describe them by race because you're afraid of being seen as racist. Also, in certain areas, like where I grew up, if you just go there and look for the black guy, you'd be so lost. It's like going into Chinatown and say, look for the Asian guy, right? Not helpful. And so it's that sort of thing. And then you say, I'm like, she's the one who usually wears like the big earrings and she's got like burgundy hair, and somebody has to say, okay, oh, the black person. It's like, that too, like, that's when it gets awkward. And that's sometimes, but most of the time, you are actually referencing something that is actually not relevant to the task at hand. Because not only is someone not defined that way, but they get to decide for themselves how defined their experience is by it. People don't live ignorant of the way they look. That would be like me going in and trying to buy a bra at a department store or a Walmart or something like that. It just ain't happening. No general purpose store on the planet carries my size. Expecting me to not be aware of that is stupid, right? But now we're getting into gaming, right? And people are like, what does this have to do with gaming? Here it is, okay? Now that there's a place for this stuff, but quite frankly, just getting to know each other and practicing simple courtesy and mutual respect and a little bit of consideration at work. You shouldn't need a friggin' rule book for that if workplaces actually taught effective communication. Effective, listening to understand and concise communication styles. We could solve this friggin' problem, especially if people felt able to say to anybody at their workplace, you know what? I don't like that. A good boss wants to know that. The thing, if anybody out there ever works for me, and people who have worked for me are going to chuckle right now. The thing that pisses me off as a supervisor more than anything is when I hear a complaint secondhand. When I hear someone was complaining about me to someone instead of coming to me and telling me what's up. Because gossip doesn't solve problems, right? Complaining doesn't solve problems. Come to me. What I usually end up saying to the person is, you know what? I'm sorry that caused you bother. That was not my intention. Please come to me when you have these issues and let's talk about it. Because complaining to somebody else doesn't solve the problem. Now I'm in a situation where I want to deal with your initial issue, but now we have to deal with this morale issue because things are now more uncomfortable than they have to be, right? Big pet peeve of mine in management when people don't speak up. Big pet peeve of mine as a creative is when people don't know how to give feedback. I have a big issue with this. Everybody comes in and critiques everybody's work. That has never worked. I don't care what anybody says. You have a manager, you talk about that. If you want a workshop, if you want to solicit advice from a trusted colleague, go there. But everybody's opinions, you get shit. It ends up being ruled by committee, pap, not good. But like I said, we're getting into gaming now with these collaborative environments and artistic things, and gaming deals with good and evil, right? Lawful and chaotic, for lack of a better term. So games have to contain the opportunity to do bad stuff so that players can get the rush of choosing to do the good thing or choosing to do the bad thing. And what that means. And you really need to clearly define what the game is basically going to treat. There's a difference between a game treating something as an inherently good act and an inherently evil act versus a game treating something as a popular act versus an unpopular act. And these are discussions that have to be made when you're making games because it matters. Because there's a big difference in an experience of a game. I always had a problem, and Neverwinter Nights was the absolute worst for this for me. But my concept of lawful good didn't always match the concept the game had of lawful good, because I'd be playing, a paladin of Helm or a paladin of Lysander or whatever, and I do something that, because I'm a big D&D nerd, like, okay, this is what this god would want. This is considered a virtue in this pantheon. And I'd get a rep knock. I'd get an alignment knock. And I'm like, what the game was deciding this was big picture bad, big picture not lawful, big picture not good, versus what this sect of belief, what this particular following, this particular church thought was good and lawful. And it drove me crazy to the point that I was constantly bouncing off of Neverwinter Nights as an RPG. Drove me nuts. That and the friggin' Fallen Paladin in 3.5 ed rules that didn't just lose all her powers and die when she fell. Because that's what happens when you're a playable character. Rant over. There are a lot of microaggressions, meaning insults rooted in stereotypes directed at gamers by people who claim to advocate against microaggressions. Okay? And the two big ones, one of the big ones are creepy. He's creepy. Okay? You hear this all the time. That guy's creepy. Or stop being creepy, And what is creepy, right? It's another lazy word, right? Remember I said at the top why I don't like the word bitch? I don't like the term creepy. Is he awkward? Is he standing too close? Is he rude? What is it? What does it mean? What is off-putting about this person? Because creepy doesn't tell them anything. Creepy is just reminding them that they're socially awkward and a relatively low status, usually male, right? It's a microaggression, according to the definition of this stuff, because people who are on the autism spectrum or who are neuroatypical or have other cognitive disabilities that don't allow them to be cool, they often get dismissed as creepy. And there are probably a bunch of people out there going like this right now, right? Because, I know this one guy, he's a totally sweet guy. He gets called creepy a lot. And my heart hurts for him because I wish people would just tell him in detail what he was doing wrong, because he cares. He doesn't want to be creepy, but he never gets any answers. And I tell him right out, this is what you did wrong when it happens with me. I don't say you're being creepy. I'm saying this pissed me off. Why did you do that? And we work it out, and it's cool. And, he has very interesting opinions, and he comes at things in a different way, and that's what's cool. You learn other perspectives about other people. But this guy has basically been run out of gaming circles where I used to live for being creepy. That's too low a bar, right? What does that mean? The other one is using gamer as a pejorative, or the term nerd in a pejorative way. Oh, nerds, oh, look, a nerd. Oh, you're a gamer. The gamer doesn't have to be your audience. Gamers are over. We're witnessing the death of the gamer identity. All these things are insults rooted in stereotypes. Gamer! and I wear this shirt. One of the things I love about this shirt is it sits here, so people can read it without things getting awkward, right? I love it. It just dodges. It dodges the really, really extra uncomfortable places. But gamer, Part of the reason I wear this shirt on air is let's break the fucking stereotype, okay? A gamer is anyone who plays games. Gamer is not associated with any other identifiable characteristics. So why is the gamer identity over? Why is the death of the identity upon us back in 2014? That was a ridiculously offensive thing to say to a group of people who has a high rate of neuroatypicality, because let's face it, all the stereotypes you're invoking with that pejorative are people who have mental or physical disabilities that make them less cool. It's ableist as hell, right? But they just did it. They did it without thinking. And then they go on and lecture other people about isms and microaggressions. And this is the problem with getting up on the high horse about microaggressions. If you subscribe to microaggression theory, everyone does it, including you. So stop being so friggin' aggressive about microaggressions. Because you don't know if you're coming down like a ton of bricks on someone who, due to an invisible disability that they have not disclosed, because that is their friggin' right because of all the stigma surrounding, disabilities, you might be judging them too harshly. You might be committing an act of aggression against them because certain disabilities come with them. I've got a friend of mine who's made me sensitive to the idea of rejection sensitivity disorder. It's something that's apparently quite common in adult ADHD, that people have like a crippling problem with rejection. But people might be saying, what, nobody likes rejection, it sucks for everybody. But for some people, it's crippling, like it's beyond that, right? It's like you stub your toe and it hurts for a year kind of thing. At least that's what I understand it. I don't have it, so I can't speak about it from the inside. But there are, eye contact things and things like that, all in this catch-all of creepy that might be the sign of a disability, and you're just being a jerk. And this is the whole problem, that everyone who starts going on about this microaggression stuff ends up seeming like a hypocrite when they get too high and mighty about it, right? Because it seems weird to be going, well, everyone does this to some extent. Well, then why are you making it like the end of the world, the equivalent to like, killing kittens? I almost said Satan worshipping puppy killers, but I actually know some people who are Satanists and they're fine people. So, it's like you can't use that one anymore. That heuristic, I can't do that. It means something different now. But this is the problem. And this is why I think, especially in gaming, which is a white, straight, cisgendered male predominant, but not inherently white, straight, cisgender and male activity, that forcing microaggressions down people's throats isn't effective in this space. The message has got to be simpler. Just empathy, consideration, mutual respect, right? Because people who don't care if they're being offensive don't give a shit about your microaggressions. The more you go on, the more they're going to fling it at you because they think you're a snowflake, okay? People who are going to troll, the more you feed them meat about how to insult you, how to get under your skin, the more they're going to do that, which is what you do when you start talking about the microaggressions you experience. You're creating troll food. But when you talk in the terms of respect with gamers, when you talk in the language of these rules are the same for everybody because they're fair, that works. And if you're like, look, if you insult people, don't expect to get far, right? You don't say don't insult people because free speech, but if you insult people, don't expect to get very far with them. They're going to think you're a jerk. People can understand that. Going, well, microaggressions apply for everybody but white dudes. No, that's not a rule you can apply to everybody. And that's not even true, because when you factor in ableism, yes, you can commit a microaggression against a white man if they've got a mental, physical, or emotional disability. Sorry to break it to you. Yeah, you can. And this is gaming. Most people have something going on there. Hate to break it to you. But that's the thing. It's useless language. The same reason I don't like bitch and I don't like creepy, microaggression just gets us too far away from the core of what we're really going for, which is don't knowingly insult people. Be more comfortable asking questions of people instead of making declarative statements. Is this okay? Do you mind this? Be more patient with people who are lacking that social awareness. And in gaming, you have to do that a lot. You do. There are some people who, because they're on the spectrum or because they're neuroatypical and they know it and they're working on it and they are self-conscious about it, but sometimes they drive you crazy, right? But you have to give them that patience because they know. They know more than anybody else. Even if they're not totally aware of what they're doing at that moment, they are deeply sensitive about it. They are aware that this is a weakness they have. So if you want patience, give patience. If you want respect, give respect. If you want the right to go, don't insult me, stop saying that, respect that when somebody else does. You also got to respect the fact that sometimes some people aren't going to care if you're insulted or not. And if those people don't care, not with your time. We're playing games here. It's here to have fun. You shouldn't be stuck with somebody who is wrecking your good time so they can be, big poser kind of thing. I don't know what it does. You guys know I don't understand hate watching. I don't understand this stuff. I show toys on TV and, YouTube TV and just talk about games and stuff. I don't get the drivers behind any of this stuff. And I've been reading your comments about what hate watching is, and I find it all very instructive. I have to form a mental bridge to it because I can't connect here, right? Like, and so this is why, because of that very specific, you got to break things down concisely and simply because of the amount, not just of neuroatypicality, but the amount of trauma and other things in gaming, systemized thinkers, all that stuff. It's got to be concise, it's got to be clear, and it's got to be universal. And microaggression theory, as normally stated, isn't. It's too full of contradictions, apparent contradictions, for the systemized brain to understand. Something as basic as courtesy, respect, and understanding, that computes. We can get somewhere with that. So let's do that. I did 2 polls over the weekend. One was, have you ever been accused of interrupting when you, in fact, were responding to being interrupted? Overwhelmingly, yes. Indication that more listening needs to go on. And the other was, were you ever accused of hostility when you were responding to hostility? Overwhelmingly, yes. These are important indicators. If in doubt, listen, ask, inquire before responding. Make sure you understand where the other person is coming from precisely because you want to be understood. Make sense? Makes sense. Even if it doesn't, poochie, first best friend. All right. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Boss fight tomorrow. Boss fight tomorrow. Thanks for watching.